Just a quick disclaimer before I start this video is in no means trying to brand all vegans like this or all meat eaters like this either. This is just my experience of an argument that I had on Facebook, which as we all know is where the best of people reside. Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin and this is where I talk about whatever the crap I want. Someday I will work on that slogan, but for now that's the way it's staying. To preface this, I want to say I have been pescatarian for a year and I have been doing it in the hopes of progressing to becoming a vegetarian, but at the minute pescatarianism is where I'm comfortable and I'm happy enough for it to stay that way for a little while longer. Apparently that's not good enough to some vegans, but we're going to get into that now. So I came across a video, it was actually yesterday, I'm actually recording this the next day after this happened. It was an E4 video where a kind of debate was happening between a vegan and a butcher, which as you can probably guess is like the two extreme sides of veganism and meat eating. I mean, can you get really any more extreme than cutting the bodies up for being a butcher? And the guy that they chose to do the debate was a very stereotypical vegan. He wasn't really willing to listen to this girl's arguments, and he just wasn't, you could tell that he'd come into it closed off and wasn't ready to listen or even try to understand the other girl's perspective. And I made a comment saying it's kind of frustrating, now this is paraphrasing, I said something like it's kind of frustrating that E4, it was E4 who held this debate, it's kind of frustrating that they chose a vegan who feeds into the stereotype of the idea that vegans aren't willing to listen and they just want to accuse you of hating animals and supporting animal cruelty, and they're not willing to even try to understand where you're coming from, and you know, all the stereotypes that you can think about of a vegan, and it was very evident that they didn't choose someone who even knew how to debate properly. Like, this debate was a mess. It wasn't, I wouldn't even call it a debate, more of just an argument, like two people talking at each other instead of trying to understand each other's point of view. And I thought that was a very, you know, like, very neutral comment. I didn't mention in my comment if I was a meat eater, if I was a vegan or anything like that. I just thought that it was unfortunate that the guy that they chose for the debate fed into the stereotypes that everyone has. I suppose because I didn't really make a comment about the meat eater, people just assumed that I was a meat eater. But the reason that I was more focused on the vegan was because even though I'm pescatarian and I have a friend who's vegetarian, we will tend to get grouped in with people like vegans, you know, like, oh, they can't go through a conversation without telling you what their diet is, and they'll try to make you feel bad about the fact that you're eating animals, and you know, all the stereotypes that have been around for, well, since the vegan boom has happened. Vegetarians and pescatarians often get grouped in with those people. So personally I found it rather unfortunate that they couldn't find someone who knew how to debate a bit more rationally for this. Like I said, I wouldn't even call it a debate. It was just two people talking like at each other and hoping that they would win, which is not how a debate should be. But let's just say this wasn't a debate, it was a conversation, if even that. So people weren't happy with what I said. And before I talk about the vegans, because there was more vegans annoyed with me than there was people who admitted to being meat eaters, there were meat eaters who were annoyed at me too. I'm not saying that this is all vegans doing this or that this is a exclusively vegan thing that happens when you try to talk about, well, your diet in any way. Meat eaters are guilty of this too. A couple of meat eaters saying things like, if all the vegans were in a desert island and there was like nothing to eat but animals, then they would have no choice but to abandon get off their high horse and abandon their morals and eat meat. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, if there's no other option, if that is all that is there, then you have to survive. It's the same way that my friend would get asked, if you were in an apocalypse, would you resort to eating meat? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's an apocalypse. But I kind of countered that argument by saying if the entire world turned to vegetation tomorrow, then meat eaters would have no option but to eat only vegetables and things that aren't made of meat. But I also added at the end that it's okay though, because that scenario is as realistic as your desert island one, because neither of those things is going to happen anyway, so there's no, why does it matter? Any comment that didn't directly address me, I just left alone, because I am really tired of fighting with people on Facebook and on social media. I try to avoid it as much as possible, so any comment that didn't directly involve me, I just left alone. Like, there was people having like kind of mini arguments in my comment section, but like they weren't talking to me, so I was just like, I'm just gonna leave that. They're talking to each other. But there were people who were directly tagging me and getting annoyed. And the people who were getting annoyed at me, their main argument was that since I wasn't a vegan, I didn't have the right to talk about how a vegan argues their point of view. And all I tried to say to these people was, addressing people with hostility is going to get hostility back. And there is a history of vegans addressing people, meat eaters more specifically, with hostility when they're trying to argue their point. They will call them murderers, they will say that they butcher animals, they will say that they support animal cruelty. And if you just immediately start accusing someone of something, they're going to shut down. That's why meat eaters are so closed off, because they don't like to be accused of these things. I mean, most people who eat meat are unaware of the torture that goes on for a lot of animals to get it to their plate. And yeah, sometimes not being aware is even worse. But you're raised not to think about what's put on your plate. So why would that change? The way I see it, and this is what I was trying to say to them, is that being more open and respectful when representing your stance will do so much better than just approaching the topic with hostility and anger, because at least then you stand a chance of people listening to you, or being willing to listen to you at the very least. If you're wanting to try to convert people to veganism, then you're not doing anything for animals by addressing people angrily or calling them all these things or saying that they're doing all this, because they won't listen to you. They will shut down and start arguing their own points about being a meat eater. They're not going to convert to veganism if you're going to address them in such a way. It's just human nature that if someone approaches you and starts accusing you of things or treats you with hostility, then your immediate reaction is to do the same back. And that's not how you get people to kind of see your point of view. A lot of vegans, particularly in this comment section, were representing their stance in the way that they were talking, and the way that they were representing their stance was exactly the way meat eaters say that they're like. Say that they're all angry and call everyone murderers, and that they support torture, and that they've got blood on their hands and everything like that. And they were representing the stereotypes. They were feeding into that because they were acting the exact way that the stereotype says that they do. Why not, instead of doing that, try to argue more respectfully and get your point across more openly and rationally, and maybe then you'll stand a chance of actually possibly converting someone. The reason I turned to pescatarianism was because I watched my friend Neve be a vegetarian for a good few years actually, and seeing how it worked for her made me want to do it myself. She never preached at me, she never called me a murderer or said that I had blood on my hands and that I hated animals or anything like that. I just saw how it worked for her, and I knew that I cared about animals. I just never believed that I would be able to do it. And seeing her do it gave me the confidence to try it myself. And the argument that you're not a vegan so you can't talk about how vegans debate these issues is a very weird way to kind of think. Because how are we supposed to argue for Black Lives Matter? How are heterosexual people supposed to support LGBT communities if the entire attitude is, if you're not part of the group, then you can't debate it, you can't argue on its behalf? And considering the fact that I as a pescatarian and my friend as a vegetarian, the fact that we get grouped in with vegans anyway kind of means that regardless we'll be affected by these stereotypes that they are perpetuating themselves. So it just made it even more hilarious that they even were using that as an argument. And they were basically saying that me being a pescatarian wasn't good enough anyway because I was supporting animals being, like fish being suffocated and all the stuff that goes into my dairy products. I was supporting the torture of cows. So they were also feeding into that stereotype that vegans think that it's never enough, it has to be their way or the highway. Which sucks because, like I say, I'm pescatarian in the hopes of being vegetarian someday. My diet is a work in progress. I'm hoping that I will be able to become a vegetarian someday. And I don't know if I'll be able to be a vegan because I have diet problems, I have stomach issues, so it wouldn't work for me, I don't think. And the fact that loads of vegans will say that that's not good enough, again, will just make people who eat meat even more reluctant to even try to do what they're saying, because it is less likely for someone to maintain a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet if they don't ease themselves into it. For me, my diet is a work in progress, and I actually had one of the vegans in the comment section say to me, well, if you were a work in progress against racism, then it's still not good enough because you're still racist. And obviously I can't speak on the terms of racism because I'm white, so I kind of turned what they were saying into something that was a bit more relative to me. So I said, as a lesbian, if there was an old man whose beliefs were ingrained about the LGBT community from the day he was born to that moment, that we were all, I don't know, perverts or whatever it is that they believe. I don't really know what it is that they believe because I don't really look into it that much. But if I saw that he was making an active effort to change how he was raised, I would appreciate that way more than someone who doesn't care and isn't trying at all and just hates us all and won't even try to make an effort to see who we are or what it is that we are actually like in reality. Because change is a work in progress. Not everyone is gonna become a vegan overnight. Not everyone is going to love gay people overnight. Not everyone is going to suddenly and not be a racist overnight. These things take time. And it seemed to me, the vegans that I were talking to, they wanted you to change immediately, change everything that you grew up with, because people grow up being meat eaters most of the time, and they want you to change that immediately, or you're a murderer and you don't care about animals, and that's just not the truth. Thankfully, I have enough residual awareness to know that not all vegans are like that these people were extremists who were interacting with me, who had a problem with me saying that maybe the vegan should have represented his views in a better way, because that's what they were annoyed with. That's what my original comment, that's all I was saying, that this guy was feeding into all the stereotypes that meat eaters have about vegans, and it was more vegans annoyed with me than meat eaters, so that was interesting. And honestly, the ultimate message that you should take from this really is that your diet is nobody else's business. If you don't want to share it, then that is your right. The fact that, and I'm not surprised that a lot of meat eaters don't want to share that they're a meat eater, because some vegans are really aggressive about it, and they put it under the disguise of, oh, we're aggressive because we care about animals. If you cared about animals, you'd be trying to be rational and trying to convert people into veganism instead of accusing them of being murderers and getting angry at them, because that's not going to work. That's not how you're going to convert people or even stand a chance of converting people. So it just doesn't make sense to me that they claim that they care about animals, because they clearly don't care enough to try to have an open conversation about it. Again, these extreme vegans, I know that there are loads and loads of vegans who are actually really nice and aren't like that. And there were a couple in the comment section who knew exactly what I was saying, and they weren't being angry at me. They were just like, exactly, that's what I'm always saying, those kind of things. It was nice that there was more people who understood what I was saying than extremists. Funnily enough, one of them actually said to me that I couldn't argue for vegans because I still eat animals, and they were like, if you were in a cage waiting to be slaughtered, who would you want rescuing you from the cage? And I was like, anyone who can get me out of the cage, to be honest. I don't really care. And he never replied to me on that, so I guess I won. Anyway, that's it for this video. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts and opinions on this issue? You don't have to share your diet if you don't want to. I just want to hear your opinions. So comment down below, like, comment, subscribe if you want to. Buy my book if you want to. The link is down in the description along with my socials. Don't do any of that if you don't want to. I don't want you there if you don't want to be there. And I'll see you next time, guys. And remember, your diet is your business. Nobody else's. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty about it, okay?